Welcome back to Grid Down Prepping at Guns America. The articles that go along with these videos are at griddownmag.com, and to subscribe to Guns America Digest and all the other stuff that we do, you can do so at gunsamerica.com/digest. Today I'm back on the topic of solar, which I have not in depth covered since the old Prepping 101 days. In fact, the original article that I did was a very small system that they were selling at Harbor Freight at the time. Solar was just coming onto the scene as the ability of consumers to get it cheap and use it. And that Harbor Freight system was really lame, actually. Not so good, but good enough at the time to be able to power 12-volt lights and that kind of stuff. None of the principles have changed from that old Harbor Freight system that I did, but the availability and the price of things has drastically come down. These days, you have rigid solar panels like this guy, okay? I don't actually have any true rigid solar panels on hand, all right? They, of the ones with the aluminum frame, okay? I don't have any of those on hand because I honestly don't buy these anymore. A solar panel this size, of the originals of those, whether they were monocrystalline or polycrystalline, the monocrystallines were generally smaller for the amount of wattage. But a panel this size, even of monocrystalline back then, and you're only talking 6-7 years ago probably, it was like 40 watts. Now, these are 100 watt rated panels, and this is a small one. And they are also not breakable. Those, I'm not saying they're not breakable, but they're certainly not a piece of glass that can take a coconut hit and smash. If a coconut hits this, it might wipe out a couple traces, but it's not gonna pull it off. Plus, you can bolt this right to your roof. You can zip it right down to your roof, and it will not have anything for the air to get under. So that's pretty darn good. They're also light. So if you're trying to do something that is very covert, where you don't want to you don't want to attach solar panels to your roof, you just want to have them so that you can use them for specific tasks. If you need them, great. That's what these are for. Now, the other thing that shocks me, these are roughly about $1 a watt. Okay, so a 100-watt solar panel like this is usually just under $100, and it comes with a charge controller and the wires for it, not the battery. But I'm gonna get into the components of a solar system momentarily. Not gonna get into a lot of the granular stuff, just to give you an idea of what a solar system consists of. And I don't care if it's big, small, or indifferent. All right, it doesn't matter. They're all the same stuff. Number one, solar panel. You have these guys. You have the rigid solar panels, which I don't have any on hand. You have the flexible solar panels, the regular flexible, and now you have these guys. Okay, these are cloth solar panels, and this is the 100-watt size. And you're seeing I'm sitting at a table that the entire table is taken up by the 300-watt size. And these are just over $1 a watt, and they're foldable, carryable, they have a pouch for your stuff. They are amazing. That's the main component of your solar system. Not the only component, not the only required component, but the main component. The second in the chain down is your charge controller, okay? Charge controllers come in many shapes and sizes. These are both 30 amp, all right? So I don't want to get into a lot of math, but I have to do some math with you, all right? Because watts, amps, volts, if you haven't been subjected to any of those terms before, then you really kind of need to understand what they are and how they interwork and how they kind of bounce off of each other to make numbers sound bigger and smaller. These are 30 amp controllers, okay, both of these. This one came with the cloth ones. This one came with the semi-rigid panel, the flexible panel, okay? They're both 30 amps. Now that's not watts, okay? The panels themselves usually are rated in watts because some panels are of 1 voltage, maybe they're 14 volts. Some panels are rated at 48 volts, 25 volts, 24 volts. You'll see different voltages on panels because they roughly match up with the size of batteries. Most batteries that you're familiar with are 12 volt, right? This is a 12 volt, 12 amp hour battery, which I'm going to get to. Now, this is where the math gets a little bit, you have to just accept that you need to do some math, or at least you need to understand a little bit of how the math works. Voltage is how fast how much force there is behind the electric current. Amps is how much current passes through. And watts is the measurement of the combination of those two things. So when you see a panel that's 100 watts and it's 14 volts, then you divide the watts by the volts and you'll come up with how many amps that ideally it can produce. Usually these panels do not run higher than 60% efficiency even in full sun. So even in full sun, you will not get 100 watts divided by 14 volts, which is roughly 7 amps, right? 70 and 28, right? Roughly 7 amps is what this 100 watt panel should be able to produce, is 7 amps. Now this is a 30 amp controller. So I could technically put 4 of these panels on this controller and it could handle it, okay? If I'm running 24 volt system, which I'll explain to you that in a minute, it would be the same kind of math, but it would be the amps would be in half. Controller is in amps, not in watts. So if you're looking at your panel, you have to figure out what is the voltage that I'm running at. Now, panels have roughly 2 types of connectors. These cloth guys came with a pin connector, all right, and actually it came with a pin connector that connects to itself, and then the other end of it connects directly into the controller. It actually has the ports for the cables that it comes with. So that's really convenient. And it comes with a long cable to run it to the panel from where your setup is. And then it comes with a battery clip cable that you can put to your battery system. And then it comes with a little dongle that allows you to connect your controller out to your 12 volt distribution. If you're going to have some kind of 12 volt distribution, either like some kind of distribution system with tabs where you could plug things into it. Because a lot of things run at 12 volts. Your security system probably runs at 12 volts. Your laptop may even run at 12 volts, and if it doesn't, it runs at 19 volts. And getting a converter for 12 to 19 volts is fairly easy to do. A lot of computer monitors run at 12 volts. Some of them run at 24, some run at 19. And the same thing, you would just need a converter to go from your bus, your 12 volt bus, to these things. And usually you're going to be using some kind of screw connector to screw these things in. The other type of connector is what's called an MC4 connector. And that's what the semi-rigid panel came with, is MC4 connectors. It actually came with 2 splitters that you can use 2 panels with one. Now these cables are male and female. So depending on how you're going to wire your system is how you will you will port that out. All right. The reason I say how you connect your system is because solar panels can be connected in series and in parallel. In series is pretty much like batteries in series. If you take a line and you connect your negative to one side of your circuit and your positive to the negative terminal of your second battery, and then the positive terminal of your second batteries to the other side of the circuit, that gives you 24 volts instead of 12 volts. And we all know these are 13.8 volts and twice that. But I'm going to call them 12, 24, 48 for now, okay? Solar panels are the same way. If you go the plus on one to the minus on the other and you connect them to your circuit this way, it will double your voltage, but the rating on how many watts you will get will stay the same. Okay, so you'll be at 24 volts. Now these charge controllers usually will only be able to handle up to 48 volts, and that would be, if you're going to parallel to your batteries, that would mean that you're going to series your batteries to 48 volts. And the reason you might want to do that, just as an offshoot, I'm not getting into grid tie here, but many of the string inverters that you do use for grid tie, many of those will run at much higher voltages. They will run at 48 volts. Some of them will run into the hundreds of volts, which is dangerous voltage. You don't want to play in that playground, all right? Unless you really know what you're doing, you have your fusing in place, you have all of your grounding in place correctly, you can get serious arcs and turn yourself into a welder, all right? We don't want to do that. So for now, you're better off to just run your system at 12 volts, maybe 24 volts, and do one battery, two batteries, maybe up to 4 batteries, but don't go crazy, all right? Now, you can still, even if you're running a 48 volt system, and you have a 12 volt appliance, you have a pump that's a 12 volt pump, you can still tap 12 volts off of any of these batteries, okay? But that's not the way charge controllers work. What a charge controller does is, a charge controller makes it so that your battery doesn't overcharge, because you can really damage your battery if you overcharge it, and you don't want to do that. That's why most setups that you'll see, if you look at the diagram when you see a charge controller, you're going to see that the inverter is not connected to the charge controller. Usually the inverter gets connected directly to the batteries, and the charge controller just controls overcharging. It does not shut off it doesn't click on and off for undercharging. If you use the terminals that say load, that usually has a little light bulb here, you could take off a limited amount of power from that. Now, 30 amps, that's what you can take off from this. This can handle 30 amps. So if you want to run out of your charge controller, you want to run lights, you want to run a pump, you want to run any of these things that could drain your batteries too low, the charge controller will also prevent you from drawing your battery too low. But if you're running a real inverter, those usually you're going to want to put on the battery. But don't go by this little video and article. I'm just not going to get... In the article, I will have a lot of these product links. I'm not running this stuff through Star and Bullock hardware like I usually do. It's too competitive a market out there. There's plenty of solar stuff in country. All this stuff was bought on eBay. Okay? So there's plenty of stuff in country on eBay. But that's basically what you want to do with your charge controller. I can explain to you my philosophy of what solar is for. What solar is for compartmental uses. That is how it is best used. You can ask anyone who's done a solar farm, if you watch that Michael Moore documentary, Planet of the Humans, you'll see that most of the big projects that they did with solar farms and huge battery banks and tapping into the grid, that stuff all failed because on a big scale, solar fails wildly. You have things breaking all the time, and it's just not good. But at the small level, solar is great. If you figure out how to make one pod for my well pump, one pod for my irrigation pump, maybe, because a well pump is going to be connected to a pressure system. It's going to have a pressure switch. I'm going to hopefully get into all of this stuff as I continue this series, as long as I'm able. That's going to have a pressure switch, and it's going to turn the pump on and off as you reduce pressure in the house. Whereas an irrigation pump, you can just push it right out. You can push it out to your sprinklers, out to your drip system, whatever it is. So if you have a pod, you won't have to worry. And each pod has its own batteries, has its own charge controller, it has its own batteries. That way you can run right out of the charge controller, protect your batteries, protect your battery life, protect your whole system, and you'll be a lot better for it. It will make a lot of things. 12-volt lights. I got into lights a couple weeks ago on Grid Down, and those systems are fantastic. If you didn't get something like that somewhere, you should, because those are extremely good to have. But you can run 12-volt lights in your house. They make 12-volt light bulbs, and you can buy them. All that kind of stuff. 12-volt heaters for your hot water tank. You can run an alternate hot water tank and run a 12-volt element in it, 24-volt element in it, which is when I'll go back to a little bit of the math. I'm trying to only do this in small bites. All right, I did series wiring, right, of doing negative to positive to negative to positive, doubles your voltage every time, or adds to your voltage every time, but keeps the power the same, or it will average. If you have panels of different ratings, it will average between them, right? But if you wire your panels in parallel and you run your batteries in parallel, meaning that all the negatives go to one side, they all meet up and they go to one side, and all the positives meet up and go to one side. You can do either or with the connectors that are available. The flexible panel came with these two-way connectors to put two panels, and you can wire those two panels either parallel or in series. If you're going to do it in series, then one side goes to the left, goes to the all the negatives go, both negatives go to one side, both positives go to the other. And the way the connectors are meted out, it all kind of works. You can also get these guys that are a six connector. There's even more than 6 connectors, but these are the ones that I just happened to grab. This is a 6 connector, which it has a male and a female. And you can do a direct connection with all of your panels on one side, on the negative, and all of your, and you would just use one of these, of course, with that particular panel. Usually they're not going to have a splitter, they're only going to have one. And then on the other side, you'll do exactly the same thing, but the opposite. Everything will go into the other side of the connector. And that way, you can run your whole system at 12 volts, at 24 volts if you get 24-volt panels, and then match them up to your batteries, which also will be run in parallel, so that your system stays 12 volts, your system stays 24 volts. And the way that the addition works on that is that the wattage will in fact double. So if you have two 100-watt panels and you keep them at 12, if you keep them at 12 volts and you run them together, then your wattage will be 200 potential watts. These guys are not going to be running more than 60% efficiency. I will, in a future video, measure that for you and show you how much potential energy there is there and I will show you how much actual energy comes out of the panel. Not today. So that's how you kind of look at your system. And if you are going to end up with a string inverter or any kind of inverter that runs off a higher voltage, and you're going to be connecting that directly to your batteries, you can run series parallel, where part of your batteries are run in series, and are run series from each other, and then each line of those is run in parallel, so that you have a series parallel for exactly what voltage you want to end up with. Same thing with the panels, because like I said, you want to balance, assuming your inverter can handle it, you want to balance the voltage between your battery bank and your panels, because batteries are not really 12 volts, they're 13.8 volts. The panel is not really 12 volts either, it is usually 14 something volts, right? 14 or 15 volts. And you go up from there to the different levels. They're all meant to stack on levels so that they do match up with each other. The only difference is, with the MC4 connectors, usually when you get a flexible panel like this guy, right, and he comes with a charge controller, he's not going to have a bare end cable. You're going to have to clip your cable and then put that cable, the ending negative, the ending single cable, into your charge controller negative, and the ending single cable positive into your positive. And these guys are usually available separately. They're usually 10 gauge or 12 gauge. I believe these are 10 gauge. And you can get crimpers that will crimp a nice connection on the end. And usually they will stick right into the bottom of your charge controller. All I had on hand was this 12 amp hour battery. I have a lot of 100 amp hour batteries, and these are all closed gel cells. These are not car batteries. They will usually have some kind of lug system on them. There's different kinds. Some have tabs that stick up. These have the tabs of the crimp connectors on them, because these were made for golf carts and scooters. That's what these little guys are. And I'm actually going to have a solar generator article coming out soon of a generator that I found that's very reasonable, coming from China. They are on their way here now. So that one we will run through Star and Bullet, because I honestly couldn't find it on eBay. And that brings me to the topic of solar generators. All right? Solar generators are all over YouTube ads. If you're listening to anything alternative with their grade B advertisers, a lot of times what people are trying to sell you are solar generators. Now, a solar generator is not what you think of with a generator. All a solar generator is some solar panels, charge controller, and a battery of some kind. All right? I prefer lead acid closed gel cells. There are plenty of LifePos out there, but a closed gel cell lead acid battery right now on eBay is about $189, maybe $169, shipped to your door. A LifePo battery is going to be around, for the similar size, at least $300 or $400. So you be the judge of that. I have not had particularly good luck with LifePo batteries, because I bought some back in the day and I went to go use them years later and they couldn't hold a charge. So you have lithium ion batteries, which are usually the small batteries, and then you have the lithium phosphate. That's what LifePo is. I call them LifePo. But they're lithium phosphate batteries. And it looks like LifePo 4, I think it is. So I stick to lead acid myself, because I am not traveling with this stuff. I actually I made a LifePo battery for that radio backpack for those of you guys who've been on Prepping 101 for a long time. I did one with LifePo for that, and I did one with lead acid, because I made two ham radio backpacks, and the LifePo would not hold the charge and the lead acid was fine. So the lead acid is heavier. I mean, these beasts are heavy, especially the 100 amp hour. They're almost a two-man lift, really, when you're old. but I would stick to the lead acid unless you really plan to use your system and get to know your system. If you're just going to throw all this into a pile for come the day like I do, I have not converted anything over to solar, because and I'm going to, because I want to do some water stuff for you guys, some pump stuff, and explain some of the stuff I just alluded to here. So I am going to set some of that stuff up so that you can see it, but for the most part, life is just too busy for most of us to perfect the solar system that's going to run our refrigerator, especially because you usually need an inverter. And as soon as you start using your inverter, the life on it's going to start to dwindle. They're just going to go away on you, because eventually they all arc. Eventually they all fail. Every transformer in the world eventually fails. And it's just going to fail when you need it if you're counting on it for AC. I say stick to DC, buy 12-volt things, 24-volt things, 48-volt things, convert your security system to 12 to this kind of thing. Maybe if you have dish internet, you could convert that, because that's also going to be running on 12 volts. Convert that so that it can run off of your solar. That's the kind of stuff that I am going to do for this column for you guys, if we get there, if we're still holding together. But obviously, my message is always the same. There's very few of you listening to me compared to how many used to listen on Prepping 101 back in the day, because the noise floor on prepping stuff is so huge. The information that you guys are getting is second to none. So don't take the poll. Don't go and see other people who may conflict with what I'm saying. This is all experience stuff that I have, that I do. I do it all. I'm not trying to sell you Amazon links or even sbhardware.com links. That stuff I bring in just so that I know you guys can get it. But it's really up to you to just begin. If you haven't begun, you have to begin. You have to begin now. So I'll see you next time.